28th of April. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is your Frontier Opening Bell. The bell lives here. My colleague in South Africa, in Johannesburg, to be specific, Tuleto is beating me to that weather, hot cup of coffee this morning with the weather changes. Tell me about the weather conditions to start with. Let's start with weather is money, everything. Weather changes these days. Tell me about it briefly, Tuleto. Good morning.
Good morning, Boasen. Yes, we've had a very cold last few days. After a very hot summer, the country is preparing for autumn. So we've been getting a lot of rains, a lot of wind, and it's very welcome in most of the country. But as we know, what happened in KZN with the floods a few years ago, so that there's a bit more concern in the KZN province where the Durban port is. But welcome colder weather all around. It's been a very, very cold, very, very hot summer.
I'm sure you, Tuleto, you cover the weather conditions in Southern Africa because it's not so good news we're getting from Zambia, Malawi, even South Africa and Zimbabwe when it comes to the impact of climate weather on food and crop production. And I'm sure this is one news now that is becoming heartbreaking for me as a journalist with millions of people and farmers and others being impacted. But let's give me a couple of minutes to we'll get to that with you. Let me quickly run everyone through the African markets over the weekend, including Cairo, where the market reopened on Sunday at 1.24% in the red. Friday was choppy to the downside for the Nigerian market, about 0.3%. The BRVN was down by 0.38%. Friday, the Nairobi stock market went down by 0.06%. The JSE, the biggest exchange on the continent, was also down on Friday. That's how the markets went, with a few gains there in between, such as Zimbabwe. But let's just move on and check the East African corridor. The big news there is the ESX, that's the Ethiopian Securities Exchange, which is set to open for business in the third quarter. Says it's raised about 1.3 billion birr in initial takeoff offer, which was much bigger than last year. Ethiopia is set to create one of the biggest stock exchanges on the African continent for this year. We'll get a whole lot more of that later on the show. Kenya's weekly coffee sales is about $10 million, while the central bank under Dr. Kamal Tuje has announced the need for banks in Kenya to recapitalize within the next 1 month. He says there will be specific idea on how much Kenyan banks will have to put on the table. They need to be competitive regionally, across Africa and globally speaking. That's the new direction that the central bank want that to go. That sounds very similar to Nigeria's central bank, Cardoso, as well. Sudan and Ethiopia are in a conflict over these sesame products between the two countries. We hope they resolve that as soon as possible. While M-Pesa's split from Safaricom is being delayed, according to the authorities, because Safaricom is looking at about 75 billion shillings tax bill that is trying to discuss and get to clear up before it could split that iconic product off from the main company, which is Safaricom itself. Let's take you to West Africa. And the news came in over the weekend on Sunday, to be specific, when Nigerian Exchange Group announced that it made strategic equity investment in the new Ethiopian Securities Exchange. It's the first time in 63 years that the Nigerian stock exchange will making an investment outside the country as a company. And this is one huge news for the NGX that became demutualized just 2 years ago. The NGX itself is looking to do a right offer to the existing shareholders when it hosts its annual general meeting over the next couple of weeks. That's in the news. It's the first handshake between West African Exchange, a major exchange, with the North African Horn of Africa's corridor with Ethiopia. That is one big news we'll be talking about in the days ahead. In the meantime, President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana has appointed a new CEO for the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation. Still in West Africa, the first in West Africa, the fifth in Africa, that's Ghana on the World Economic Governance Index. That's some good news for Nana Akufo-Addo, who's wrapping up his second term in office in December. And Liberia has lifted the ban on export of unrefined rubber, and that's under the new president who took office just a few weeks ago. Let me take you to Southern Africa. Just raise the curtain forward to later. We'll be dipping into much, much bigger within the next few minutes, with Zimbabwe holding 2.5 tons of gold, $300 million in cash reserves. The new Zim gold backed currency, ZIG, is taking off today. The new currencies was unveiled over the weekend. The various denominations, we'll see how that begin to work out for this country. They now have about 5 currencies in place in the country. In the meantime, the SCB and Old Mutual fintech subsidiaries are looking to launch a UAE wealth management platform where the IMF Managing Director Christina Georgieva is close to a second term in office as nominations are getting close. She's been a real flag bearer for the IMF, and I'm sure for all intents and purposes, she's just likely to swing a second term in office. Tuletu, walk me through your Southern African week. I'm sure you've got GDP, inflation, and a whole lot more on your radar. Talk to me.
Yes, thank you, Boasin. We'll just start with Mauritius. Last Wednesday, the Bank of Mauritius held its first MPC meeting since November 2023. The bank decided to keep the key rate unchanged at 4.5%, citing the downward trend in average headline inflation and the projection of it declining even further towards the end of 2024 as a reason. And then also, still on Mauritius, the country's inflation numbers came out on Friday. Mauritius inflation decreased to 4.9% year on year. Core inflation also maintained its downward trend. Consumer prices, will also benefit from stable oil. They have benefited from stable oil prices this year. And economists, they forecast that the Brent crude oil price will average $82.2 per barrel, compared to last year at $82.5 per barrel, right? And then also with the Mauritian rupee, it's also expected to strengthen this year, which is more good news for the MPC. But still on the inflation topic, Zambia's headline inflation for March increased to 13.7% year on year from 13.5% in February. This is the highest level since August 2021. The higher print was attributed to both the food and the non-food categories. And then just last year, the week was dominated by PMIs. Mozambique's PMI came out, it declined into contractionary territory, just under the 50-point mark to 49.7. Zambia's PMI also fell, but this wasn't a surprise, given the forex depreciation and the renewed pressure on fuel prices. Zambia's also experienced a reduction in money circulation, along with the weak currencies, that continuously impact demand. South Africa also had the same issue. The PMI numbers came out last week. They were quite disappointing, falling back into contractionary territory. So, all in all, when we're looking at the PMIs, we can see that, might not be good news for first quarter GDP numbers that will be coming out, in May, usually for most countries. And then what was interesting last week, Boasin, South Africa reached a very historic wage agreement in the country's gold mining sector. For the first time in more than 70 years, Harmony Gold signed a 5-year deal with all relevant unions. So this is big news, Also, you mentioned earlier that the IMF actually had its press briefing last week. The fund noted issues around drought conditions, debt restructuring, and development issues and other development issues in African countries. The IMF noted the frequency in increasing climate shocks globally, and speaking specifically about droughts in Zambia, in Malawi, and in Zimbabwe. So it was quite a busy week last week. What was interesting as well is that Zambia's power utility company, ZESCO, it signed a deal with the Mozambique counterpart, EDM, that will enable Zambia to import an additional 40 megawatts of power, supplementing the existing 50 megawatts from a previous agreement. Total imports from Mozambique of 90 megawatts will be in effect from 30 June 2025. So all in all, it was a very busy last week in Southern Africa.
Okay, great capture. You've got a whole lot in the basket. I'm sure, yes, always as the first week of every month looks like in terms of numbers, economic data. But then we'll get into the second week starting today, Monday, the 8th of April. So I'm sure we'll still got a couple of data to look at for. Walk me through very quickly, what are the top economic data you're looking at this week within some countries within the Southern African region, Fileto?
Yes. So just very quickly, just to run through this, South Africa today on Monday, the Reserve Bank published the latest gold reserves and government bond holdings data for March. You know, a lot of attention has been placed here. If you remember correctly, in February, the Minister of Finance, Godongwana, mentioned that they want to tap into this golden reserve and forex account to help with the growing debt of South Africa. So as we speak, there's 150 billion that the government wants to tap into, recently, the governor of the Reserve Bank, Kganyago, reminded government that they have to push a particular bill before they can actually tap into the account. And ideally, this should happen before the elections on 29 May, Just a quick run through. We expect Zambia inflation numbers to come out on the 9th and Namibia inflation numbers to come out on the 9th. On the 10th, inflation numbers for Mozambique will be out. Mozambique's inflation rate fell for a fourth month to 4% in February. So the market is keeping a very close number on that to see if there will be a continuing downward trend on headline inflation. On the 11th of March, which is a Thursday, South Africa will focus on production numbers. The SSA will release manufacturing production data and mining production data for the country for the month of February. The sectors have been facing or struggling with local challenges, including what we call load shedding, which is rolling power outages. There's also the issue of currency fluctuation that the country has been dealing with, power blackouts and logistical problems at Transnet, which has been really coming in the way of, exporting our minerals, and of course the overall deterioration of railway and transport infrastructure. So these are the issues, that we are dealing with in South Africa. And of course, in Mauritius on Friday, those tourist numbers are coming out.
Yes, thank you so much. Quite a whole lot, by the way, again, because of with the news coming through this morning with the whole Transnet issues, South Africa's shipping maritime business is becoming one of the worst right now in Africa and around the world. It's quite not interesting. It's quite amazing how the most advanced economy in Africa could be losing its very strategic strength in electricity or power for the mining sector, as well as logistics, which of course you've got around the Durban, the whole seaports across in Cape Town and elsewhere in South Africa. It's just quite amazing how things have gone so down under the administration that is going back for an election in May 29. It's going to be very crunching election time, I'm sure. I'm sure we can count on you during the election time to bring us the economics, because it's going to be very tough for the ANC, isn't it, my friend? It's going to be very difficult for the ANC to pull through this time around. There are concerns out there whether some coalition could surface. Give me that 1 minute quickly on South African politics ahead of the elections, May 29.
Yes, this is a very good point. First, this is the biggest election since 1994, so 30 years in, and we're seeing that the ANC might actually lose, it is expected to lose its majority shareholding. and expected to form coalitions with smaller parties. And we know that historically the ANC has not done very well in coalitions. They've tried to actually come together with the EFF in the past. They've tried to come together with the DA as well in the past, So the market is quite concerned because obviously this means that there might be some changes in some policy. The ANC has been pushing reforms in the electricity sector. They've been pushing reforms in the communications sector, in the transport sector. And we all know that, the EFF is more nationalistic in nature. So everybody is just looking out to see what will happen. We are all on the edge of our seats. But true to note that major polling institutions have all said that the ANC will drop quite significantly on May 29 in terms of being voted in the national elections.
Don't be on the edge of your seat. Fasten your seatbelt. You've got to sit very comfortably. Sit back and fasten your seatbelt. You're an economic journalist. I'm sure you're going to be at the top of all of this, but politics and economy together. It's going to be a very rich time for political economy when we step into the month of May for Africa's, one of Africa's second biggest economy. I'm sure everyone's eye will be on South Africa. Thank you, Tuletu. What our viewers are looking at right now is the Northern African headlines, with Egypt looking to host the joint investment conference with the European Union on June the 29th to 30. That's just about 2 months down the line or thereabout. In the meantime, the whole Tunisia's reform over the past 1 year has been knocked by civil society, says it's still negative. Well, whatever President Said is tweaking as far as the reforms are concerned, is still being questioned. Morocco is set to break new avocado exports records despite problems with water in the North African economy. But good news for Morocco, because Air Arabia is adding additional 3 flights to the weekly schedules that it has out of Rabat to Agadir, one of the big cities in Morocco, and that will be effective June the 1st. So if you're in that corridor, you've got more frequency of flights between Rabat and Agadir as Air Arabia wants to expand its commercial aviation business in Morocco, one of the biggest economies and of very charming routes for tourism and transport, air tourism in North Africa. That's about it for today. Thank you so much, Tuletu, to enjoy your new season of the cold weather. We're still a little bit warm and hot here in Lagos, Nigeria, but I guess we're getting to the start of the heavy rainfall season as well. So we've got to deal with a whole lot moving forward. Thank you. Have a great day. And thank you, everyone, for watching.